Welcome to Monk's Temple. Imagine, if you will, that you are standing at the edge of a vast, deep forest. The trees are ancient, their roots plunging deep into the earth, their branches reaching toward a sky you cannot quite see. The air is cool and damp. You can hear the sound of water trickling somewhere in the distance, and the occasional call of a bird you cannot name. You have come to this forest because you have heard a rumor. You have heard that at its very center, there is a clearing. And in that clearing, there is a monk. Not just any monk, but one who has spent his entire life studying a single, perplexing question. The question is not about enlightenment, not about suffering, not even about the nature of reality itself. The question is simpler, and far more personal. The question is, what are we supposed to do with this thing we call desire? Not just any desire, but the deepest, most confusing, most intoxicating desire of all. The desire for union. The desire for touch. The desire for sex. You step into the forest. The path is not straight. It winds and turns, and sometimes you lose it altogether. But you keep walking. And as you walk, you begin to notice things. The way a fallen log is covered in soft moss. The way sunlight filters through the canopy in long, golden shafts. The way your own breath sounds in the silence. You are not just walking toward an answer. You are walking toward a different way of asking the question. This is Monk's Temple. And this is a story about sex. But it is not the story you think. It is not a story of rules and prohibitions, of sin and salvation, of guilt and shame. It is a story about clarity. It is a story about seeing clearly, for the first time, what this force really is, where it comes from, and what it actually wants from you. Let us begin with a confession. For most of human history, we have told ourselves a story about sex. The story goes like this: sex is a personal thing. It is an expression of who we are, of our deepest selves. It is a private, intimate connection between two people. It is something we do, something we choose, something that belongs to us. This story feels true. It feels so true that to question it seems almost absurd. Of course, sex is personal, we think. What could be more personal than this? But here is where the Buddha's teaching asks us to pause. Here is where the path into the forest takes its first unexpected turn. The Buddha looked at human experience with a kind of radical honesty that most of us avoid. He looked not at what we wanted to be true, but at what was actually true. And when he looked at desire, all desire, including sexual desire, he saw something surprising. He saw that it was not personal at all. Think about it this way. Have you ever noticed how desire arises without your permission? You are walking down the street, minding your own business, and suddenly you see someone. Your eyes catch them. Your attention narrows. Something shifts in your chest, in your stomach, in places you cannot name. You did not choose this. You did not decide, at 2:37 on a Tuesday afternoon, that you would now feel desire. It simply arose. It came from somewhere, from some deep well within you, and it washed over you like a wave. You were its recipient, not its author. This is the first great insight. Sex is not something we do. It is something that flows through us. It is a force, an energy, a current. It is ancient, far older than you are. It has been flowing through living beings for millions of years. It flowed through your ancestors, through creatures you would not recognize, through forms of life that existed long before the first human stood on two legs. And it will flow through beings long after you are gone. You are not its owner. You are, at best, a temporary vessel. A modern psychologist might call this the libido. A biologist might call it the reproductive instinct. A poet might call it the fire of life. The Buddha called it tanha, craving. And he did not call it good or bad. He simply called it real. He called it the thing that drives the whole messy business of existence. It is the engine of birth and death, of longing and loss, of the endless cycle of becoming. And it is impersonal. It does not care about you. It does not care about your happiness, your fulfillment, your dreams of love. It has only one goal: to continue itself. To flow. To propagate. To move from vessel to vessel, generation after generation, using your most beautiful feelings as fuel for its own blind purpose. There is a story about a young man who came to see a monk at a temple very much like this one. He was handsome, successful, charming. Women found him irresistible. He had had many lovers, and he had enjoyed every one of them. But he was not happy. He sat before the monk with a furrowed brow and said, "I don't understand. I have everything I thought I wanted. I have pleasure whenever I want it. But I feel empty. I feel like I am using people, and being used in return. What is wrong with me?" The monk did not answer immediately. He sat in silence for a long moment, looking not at the young man but at the flickering flame of a candle on the altar. Then he said, "Tell me about the ocean." The young man was confused. The ocean? What about it? When you stand at the edge of the ocean, the monk said, and a wave comes in and washes over your feet, do you think the wave loves you? Does it choose you, specifically you, to touch? The young man shook his head. No. The wave is just the wave. It doesn't know me. Exactly, said the monk. And when the wave retreats, does it miss you? Does it long for you? Does it feel the ache of separation? No. Then why, the monk asked gently, do you expect something different from the force that moves through you? Why do you take its arising and passing so personally? The young man sat in silence. He looked at his own hands. He looked at the candle. He looked at the monk. And for the first time in his life, he began to see. The force that had driven him, that had seemed so personal, so urgent, so defining, was not his at all. It was just the ocean. And he was just the shore. This is the first teaching. And it is a hard teaching. It is hard because we have built so much of our identity around our desires. We think, I am the kind of person who wants this. We think, my desires make me who I am. But the Buddha invites us to look more closely. Who is this I that wants? Where is it located? Is it in your thoughts? Your thoughts come and go. Is it in your body? Your body is constantly changing, cells dying and being replaced. Is it in your feelings? Your feelings shift moment by moment, pleasure giving way to pain, pain giving way to boredom, boredom giving way to desire again. There is no fixed self to be found. There is only the ocean, and the shore, and the endless coming and going of waves. When you begin to see this, something shifts. The desperate urgency of desire begins to loosen its grip. You stop chasing every wave. You stop believing that the next wave will be the one that finally satisfies you, finally completes you, finally makes you whole. You begin to understand that the waves will keep coming whether you chase them or not. And you begin to ask a different question. Not, how can I get what I want, but, how can I relate to this force with wisdom? How can I let it flow through me without being swept away? This is the beginning of the path. This is the first step into the clearing. If what you are hearing resonates, if something in these words stirs a recognition, then I invite you to take a moment. Press the subscribe button below. This is not just a transaction. It is a gesture. It is a way of saying to yourself, yes, I am on this path. Yes, I am willing to look more deeply. Yes, I want to continue this conversation. When you subscribe to Monk's Temple, you are not just following a channel. You are joining a community of seekers, of people who are willing to walk into the forest, who are willing to ask the hard questions, who are willing to sit with the uncomfortable truths. So if that is you, if that is who you want to be, then subscribe now. And let us continue the journey together. There is a famous teaching in the Buddhist tradition. It is called the teaching of the two arrows. The Buddha said that when we experience pain, it is as if we are struck by an arrow. This first arrow is unavoidable. It is part of life. Sickness comes. Loss comes. Disappointment comes. The body ages. Loved ones die. These things are not punishments. They are simply the nature of existence. The first arrow will strike every one of us, again and again, as long as we live. But then, the Buddha said, we shoot ourselves with a second arrow. This second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. It is the resistance, the denial, the self-pity, the anger, the shame. The first arrow is physical. The second arrow is mental. And while the first arrow is unavoidable, the second is optional. We do not have to shoot ourselves. We can choose to simply feel the first arrow, and let it be. This teaching applies to pleasure as well. When pleasure arises, it is like being struck by a pleasant arrow. It feels good. It is natural. There is nothing wrong with it. But then, so often, we shoot ourselves with a second arrow. We grasp at the pleasure. We try to hold on to it. We worry about losing it. We compare it to past pleasures. We plan how to get more of it. And in doing so, we turn the simple experience of pleasure into a source of suffering. Nowhere is this more true than with sexual pleasure. The first arrow of sexual feeling arises naturally. It is a biological reality. It is part of being human. There is nothing unwholesome about it. But then the mind gets involved. The mind says, this is good. I want more. I need this. I deserve this. If I don't get this, something is wrong. And suddenly, the simple, natural experience of sensation becomes a source of craving, of clinging, of anxiety, of despair. Let me tell you a story about a woman who came to the temple. She was in her 40s, married for 20 years, with 2 children. She loved her husband. He was kind, reliable, a good father. But the passion had faded. The sexual spark that had once been so bright was now a dim ember. She missed it. She worried about it. She read books, tried new things, had conversations, went to therapists. Nothing worked. And the more she tried to reignite the spark, the more frustrated she became. She began to resent her husband. She began to doubt herself. She began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake, if she had married the wrong person, if her whole life was a lie. She came to the monk in tears. "I feel like I'm dying inside," she said. "I'm so hungry for something I can't have. And I hate myself for wanting it." The monk listened. He did not offer advice. He did not tell her she was wrong to want passion. He simply sat with her in her pain. Then he said, "Let me ask you something. When you were a child, did you ever have a favorite toy?" She nodded, confused by the question. "Yes. A stuffed rabbit. I carried it everywhere." "And what happened to that rabbit?" She thought for a moment. "I don't know. I lost it somewhere. Or maybe my mother threw it away. I don't remember. Do you still miss it?" She laughed, despite herself. "No. I haven't thought about it in years." "Exactly," said the monk. "The desire for that rabbit was real. It was intense. It consumed you. But it passed. It passed because you grew. You changed. The rabbit was no longer what you needed. And now, here you are, decades later, consumed by a different desire. And you believe this one is permanent. You believe this one defines you. But it is no more permanent than the desire for the rabbit. It, too, will pass. The question is not whether you will ever feel that spark again. The question is whether you can make peace with the moment you are in right now. Can you let yourself be exactly where you are, without shooting yourself with the second arrow of longing and self-hatred? The woman sat in silence. She looked out the window at the trees. She felt the weight of her own breath. And slowly, something shifted. She realized that the suffering she was experiencing was not coming from the absence of passion. It was coming from her resistance to that absence. It was coming from the story she was telling herself, "Something is wrong. I am failing. My life is incomplete." The first arrow was the natural cooling of desire over time. The second arrow was her war against reality. This is the heart of the Buddhist teaching on sex. It is not about what you do or don't do with your body. It is about what you do with your mind. It is about whether you can experience the arising of desire without immediately leaping into craving. It is about whether you can feel pleasure without grasping, and feel its absence without despair. It is about learning to be with what is, rather than constantly fighting for what you think should be. Let me offer you a new metaphor. Imagine that your mind is a garden. It is not a garden you created. It was here before you arrived. It has its own soil, its own climate, its own history. Seeds have been planted in this garden for generations, by your parents, your culture, your ancestors, your past experiences. Some of these seeds are beautiful. They grow into flowers of kindness, wisdom, generosity. Some of these seeds are less beautiful. They grow into weeds of craving, aversion, confusion. Now, sexual desire is not a weed. It is not a flower. It is something else entirely. It is like the rain. It falls on the garden whether you want it to or not. It is a natural phenomenon. The question is not whether the rain falls. The question is what you do with it. Do you let it nourish the flowers? Or do you let it feed the weeds? This is where the practice of mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness is the art of watching the garden without immediately rushing in to pull things up or water them down. It is the ability to simply notice. Ah, here is desire arising. Here is craving taking hold. Here is the mind spinning its stories. And in that noticing, something remarkable happens. The desire loses some of its power. It is no longer an overwhelming force that sweeps you away. It becomes simply a phenomenon, a weather pattern, a passing cloud. There was once a young man who came to the temple because he was addicted to pornography. He spent hours every day watching it. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. He felt ashamed, weak, out of control. He had prayed, made promises, thrown away his devices, only to buy new ones. He was desperate. He sat before the monk and poured out his story. "I am a slave to this," he said. "I hate myself for it, but I can't stop. What is wrong with me?" The monk said, "Tell me about the river." The young man blinked. "The river? There is a river near here," the monk said. "It flows fast and strong. Sometimes people come to it and try to swim against the current. They exhaust themselves. They panic. They drown. But there are others who come to the river and simply sit on its banks. They watch the water flow. They do not try to stop it. They do not try to fight it. They just watch. And in the watching, they are at peace. Which one are you?" The young man understood immediately. He had been fighting the river. He had been trying to push away his desires with sheer willpower, and the fighting had only made them stronger. The monk was inviting him to try something different. To sit on the bank. To watch the desires arise and pass without judging them, without acting on them, without fighting them. Not because the desires were good, but because fighting them was making them worse. This is the paradox of desire. The more you fight it, the stronger it becomes. The more you try to suppress it, the more it erupts in unexpected ways. But the more you simply observe it, with gentle, non-judgmental awareness, the more it begins to lose its grip. It is like a fire that needs fuel. Fighting is fuel. Shame is fuel. Self-hatred is fuel. But awareness is water. It does not fight the fire. It simply deprives it of what it needs to burn. The young man left the temple that day with a new practice. Whenever the urge arose, he did not fight it. He did not give in to it either. He simply sat, metaphorically, on the bank of the river. He watched the urge arise. He noticed the sensations in his body, the tension, the heat, the restlessness. He noticed the thoughts in his mind, the justifications, the fantasies, the stories. He did not judge any of it. He just watched. And slowly, over weeks and months, something shifted. The urges came less frequently. And when they came, they were less urgent. He had not conquered them. He had simply made peace with them. And in that peace, he found a freedom he had never imagined possible. Now we come to a crucial point. In the modern world, we are constantly presented with two extreme views of sex. On one side, there is the puritanical view. This view says that sex is dangerous, dirty, sinful. It says that pleasure is suspect, that desire is weakness, that the body is a trap. This view has deep roots in certain religious traditions, and it has caused immense suffering. It has filled people with shame. It has marriages. It has created a culture of secrecy and hypocrisy. On the other side, there is the permissive view. This view says that sex is just a natural function, like eating or sleeping. It says that any restriction is repression, that any boundary is oppression, that pleasure is the highest good. This view has its own roots in the reaction against Puritanism, and it too has caused suffering. It has led to exploitation, to emptiness, to a kind of desperate, joyless pursuit of sensation. The Buddha's teaching offers a third way. It is not a compromise between these two extremes. It is something entirely different. It is a way of seeing clearly, of understanding what sex actually is and what it actually does, and then making choices based on that understanding rather than on fear or rebellion. Imagine you are walking along a mountain ridge. On one side, there is a steep drop into a dark canyon. That is Puritanism. On the other side, there is a steep drop into a swirling river. That is permissiveness. The path itself is narrow. It requires balance. It requires attention. It requires that you know where you are placing your feet. But the path is there. It is walkable. And it leads somewhere. The middle way in sexuality is not about finding the perfect set of rules. It is about cultivating a quality of awareness that allows you to see the consequences of your actions. It is about asking, in each moment, what is skillful here? What leads to well-being? What reduces suffering, for myself and for others? There is a story about a married couple who came to the temple. They had been together for 10 years. They loved each other, but their sex life had become a source of conflict. She wanted more tenderness, more connection, more slowness. He wanted more excitement, more variety, more frequency. They had fought about it for years. They had tried compromise, sometimes her way, sometimes his way. But neither felt truly satisfied. They were both resentful. They were both lonely. They sat before the monk and told their story. When they finished, the monk was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You are both asking the wrong question." They looked at each other, confused. "What do you mean?" the husband asked. "You are asking, how can I get what I want?" the monk said. "You are treating your sex life like a negotiation, a transaction. She wants tenderness, so she asks for it. He wants excitement, so he asks for it. And you each feel cheated when the other does not provide. But this is not the way of the middle path. The middle path asks a different question. It asks, what does this moment require? What is needed here, now, for both of us to feel seen, heard, and valued?" The monk continued. When you approach each other with that question, something shifts. You are no longer two separate individuals trying to get your needs met. You are two people, together, exploring a mystery. Sometimes the mystery calls for tenderness. Sometimes it calls for excitement. Sometimes it calls for something you have not yet imagined. But you cannot know what it calls for if you are already committed to a particular outcome. You have to be present. You have to be listening. You have to be willing to be surprised. The couple left the temple with a new practice. They agreed to set aside their fixed ideas about what sex should be. They agreed to approach each other with curiosity rather than demand. They agreed to ask, in each moment, what is needed here. And slowly, their sex life transformed. Not because they found the perfect balance between tenderness and excitement, but because they stopped treating each other as objects to be negotiated with and started treating each other as fellow travelers on a path they were walking together. There is another layer to this teaching, and it is perhaps the most challenging of all. The Buddha observed that desire does not just arise spontaneously. It arises in relation to objects. We see something, or think of something, or remember something, and desire arises. But here is the trick: the object of desire is never quite what it seems. Think about it. When you desire someone, what is it you actually desire? Is it their body? But their body is constantly changing. It is aging, digesting, shedding cells. The body you desire today is not the same body you desired yesterday. Is it their mind? Their mind is even more changeable. Thoughts arising and passing, moods shifting, attention wandering. Is it their personality? Personality is just a collection of habits, patterns, reactions. There is nothing solid there. And yet, desire paints a picture. It creates an illusion. It takes this shifting, changing, impermanent collection of phenomena and freezes it into a fixed object, the one, the beloved, the person I cannot live without. This is not a lie. It is not a sin. It is simply how the mind works. But it is an illusion. And when we mistake the illusion for reality, we suffer. There is a famous teaching in the Buddhist tradition about a rope and a snake. You are walking along a path at dusk. You see something coiled on the ground. In the dim light, you mistake it for a snake. Your heart races. Your body tenses. You feel fear. But then you look more closely. You see that it is just a rope. And instantly, the fear vanishes. The snake was never there. It was a projection of your mind. The fear was real, but its object was not. Desire works the same way. It projects qualities onto its object that are not actually there. It sees permanence where there is only change. It sees completeness where there is only imperfection. It sees a savior where there is only another human being, struggling and confused, just like you. The desire itself is real. The longing is real. But its object is, in large part, a creation of your own mind. A young woman came to the temple many years ago. She was in love. Deeply, desperately, hopelessly in love. The object of her love was a man she had known for only a few weeks. He was handsome, charismatic, mysterious. He said all the right things. He made her feel seen, special, alive. She was convinced he was her soulmate. She was ready to leave her job, her city, her friends, to follow him anywhere. But there was a problem. He was not available. He was married. He had children. He had made it clear that he could not leave them. And yet, he continued to pursue her. He sent her messages. He made promises. He filled her with hope and then, just as quickly, dashed it. She was in agony. She could not eat. She could not sleep. She could not think of anything but him. She came to the monk and said, "I know this is wrong. I know I should walk away. But I can't. I love him too much. He is everything to me. The monk said, "Tell me about the mirage." She frowned. "The mirage? Have you ever been in a desert?" the monk asked. "Or seen pictures of one? When the sun beats down on the sand, it creates an illusion. It looks like water. It looks so real that you could swear it is there. Travelers have died chasing that illusion, dying of thirst while following a vision of water that did not exist." She nodded slowly. "Yes, I understand. This man is your mirage," the monk said gently. "The water you see in him. The completeness, the salvation, the soulmate, it is not there. It is a projection of your own longing. He is just a man. A flawed, confused, possibly manipulative man. The love you feel is real. The longing is real. But the object of that longing is an illusion. And if you chase it, you will die of thirst in the desert." She did not want to hear this. She argued. She defended him. She insisted that he was different, that their love was special, that the monk just didn't understand. But the monk did not argue back. He simply sat with her, letting her words wash over him, offering no resistance. And slowly, over the course of many visits, something began to shift. She began to see the gaps in her own story. She began to notice the moments when his actions did not match his words. She began to feel, underneath the desperate longing, a quiet voice that knew the truth. It took time. It took pain. But eventually, she walked away. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she stopped loving the illusion. She began to see him as he was, not as she had projected him to be. And in that seeing, she was freed. We have spoken a great deal about the inner experience of desire. But now we must turn outward. Because sex is not just a private matter. It involves other people. It has consequences in the world. And with those consequences comes responsibility. There is a teaching in the Buddhist tradition about the four sublime states: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are not just nice ideas. They are practices. They are ways of training the mind to relate to others with wisdom and care. And they have everything to do with how we approach sex. Loving kindness is the wish for others to be happy. Compassion is the wish for others to be free from suffering. Sympathetic joy is the ability to rejoice in the happiness of others. Equanimity is the ability to remain balanced in the face of life's ups and downs. When we bring these qualities into our sexual lives, everything changes. Sex is no longer about getting what we want. It becomes a way of connecting, of giving, of sharing. It becomes an expression of care rather than a demand for satisfaction. Let me tell you a story about a man who learned this lesson the hard way. He was successful, wealthy, powerful. He was used to getting what he wanted. And what he wanted, more than anything, was admiration. He surrounded himself with people who looked up to him, who laughed at his jokes, who praised his accomplishments. And he surrounded himself with women. Beautiful women. He had a wife, but he also had lovers. Many lovers. He told himself it was harmless. He told himself they wanted it as much as he did. He told himself he was giving them something. Attention, excitement, a taste of his glamorous life. But then something happened. One of his lovers fell in love with him. Really in love. She started calling him all the time, showing up at his office, sending him letters. She said she couldn't live without him. She said she would leave her husband, her children, everything, to be with him. He panicked. This was not what he had signed up for. This was messy. This was complicated. This was real. He tried to let her down gently. He told her he cared about her, but he couldn't leave his wife. He told her he hoped they could still be friends. He told her all the things men in his position tell women in hers. But she did not take it well. She spiraled into depression. She lost weight. She stopped sleeping. She started drinking. And then, one night, she drove her car into a tree. She survived. Barely. But she was changed. Her face was scarred. Her body was broken. And her husband, who had known nothing, found out everything. He left her. He took the children. She was alone, damaged, and utterly destroyed. The man came to the temple because he could not live with himself. He sat in the meditation hall for hours, staring at the floor. He did not speak. He did not move. Finally, after many days, he went to the monk and said, "I did this. I destroyed her. And I don't know how to live with that." The monk said, "You cannot undo what has been done. The past is gone. But you can learn from it. You can let it change you. The question is not whether you will ever be free of guilt. The question is whether you will let this suffering teach you something about the nature of power, and about the responsibility that comes with it." The man wept. He had never thought of himself as powerful. He had thought of himself as charming, desirable, successful. But power was exactly what he had. And he had used it carelessly. He had taken what he wanted without considering the consequences. He had treated other people's hearts as if they were disposable. This is the shadow side of sexuality. It is not just a force that flows through us. It is a force that connects us. It creates bonds. It stirs emotions. It awakens hopes and fears that run deeper than reason. And when we use it without care, without compassion, without awareness, we can cause immense harm. Not just to others, but to ourselves. The man stayed at the temple for a long time. He did not become a monk. That was not his path. But he did begin a new practice. He began to pay attention. He began to notice the effects of his actions on others. He began to ask, before he acted, is this kind? Is this wise? Is this likely to cause suffering? And slowly, over time, he began to change. Not into a perfect man, there is no such thing. But into a man who was at least trying to walk the path, rather than simply following his desires wherever they led. We have covered a great deal of ground. We have spoken about the impersonal nature of desire. We have spoken about the two arrows, about the garden and the weeds, about the middle way, about the illusion of the object, about the responsibility of power. But there is one more teaching, and it is the most important of all. It is the teaching of the still point. In the center of every storm, there is a place of calm. The winds may howl. The waves may crash. But at the very center, there is stillness. The same is true of the mind. Beneath all the agitation, all the craving, all the fear, there is a place of peace. It is always there. It is never disturbed. It is your true nature. And the whole of the Buddhist path is simply learning to find that place, and to rest there. When it comes to sex, this is the ultimate freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want. Not the freedom from desire. But the freedom to be present, awake, and at peace, no matter what is arising. The freedom to feel desire without being consumed by it. The freedom to experience pleasure without grasping. The freedom to be with another person without losing yourself. The freedom to rest in the still point, even as the storm rages around you. There is a story about an old monk who lived in a small hut at the edge of the forest. He was known for his peace. People came from far away just to sit with him, to feel the calm that radiated from his presence. One day, a young woman came to him. She was beautiful, and she knew it. She had spent her whole life using her beauty to get what she wanted. But now she was tired. She was empty. She wanted something real. She sat before the monk and said, "I have had many lovers. I have been desired by many men. But I have never felt truly loved. I have never felt truly seen. Can you help me?" The monk looked at her with great kindness. He did not see her beauty as a threat or a temptation. He simply saw her, a human being, suffering. He said, "Close your eyes." She closed her eyes. "Now," he said, "feel your breath. Feel the air moving in and out of your body. Feel the rise and fall of your chest. Feel the life flowing through you." She did as he said. She felt her breath. She felt her body. She felt the simple fact of being alive. "Now," he said, "ask yourself this question: who is the one who is breathing? Who is the one who is feeling? Who is the one who is aware of all these sensations?" She sat with the question. She looked for the one who was breathing. She looked for the self, the soul, the essence. But she could not find it. There was only breathing. Only feeling. Only awareness. No separate self to be found. She opened her eyes. She looked at the monk. And for the first time in her life, she felt completely at peace. She had spent her whole life trying to be seen, trying to be desired, trying to prove that she existed. But now she saw that the one who needed to be seen was an illusion. The one who craved desire was a phantom. What was real was simply this: awareness, presence, life flowing through her. And in that realization, all her searching came to an end. This is the still point. It is not somewhere you go. It is not something you achieve. It is what you already are, beneath all the layers of craving and fear. And when you rest there, sex takes its proper place. It is no longer the center of your life. It is no longer a desperate quest. It becomes simply one more expression of the mystery, one more way of connecting with the flow of life. Sometimes it arises. Sometimes it does not. Either way, you are at peace. Either way, you are home. So where does this leave us? We have walked deep into the forest. We have sat with the monk in the clearing. We have heard teachings that challenge everything we thought we knew about desire, about love, about ourselves. But the question remains: what do we do now? How do we take these teachings and bring them into our daily lives? The answer is simple, though not easy. We practice. We practice mindfulness. We practice compassion. We practice seeing clearly. We do not try to become perfect. We do not try to eliminate desire overnight. We simply take the next step. And then the next. And then the next. There is a story about a man who came to the Buddha and asked, "Can you sum up your entire teaching in one sentence?" The Buddha said, "Yes. Suffering exists. It has a cause. It can end. There is a path. That is all. Four truths. Simple, profound, and completely practical. When it comes to sex, the same truths apply. Suffering exists. The suffering of craving, of grasping, of loneliness, of shame. It has a cause. The cause is ignorance, not seeing clearly the nature of desire, of self, of reality. It can end. There is a way out of the maze. And there is a path. The path is mindfulness. The path is compassion. The path is the gradual, patient work of waking up. You do not have to be a monk to walk this path. You do not have to be celibate. You do not have to be perfect. You just have to be willing. Willing to look. Willing to question. Willing to let go of the stories you have been telling yourself. Willing to sit on the bank of the river and watch the water flow. Willing to rest in the still point, again and again, no matter how many times you are swept away. The forest is vast. The path is long. But you are not walking alone. Every being who has ever struggled with desire has walked this same path. Every being who has ever felt the ache of longing has stood where you stand. And every being who has ever found peace has discovered what you are discovering now, that the peace was always there, waiting. Waiting for you to stop searching. Waiting for you to stop grasping. Waiting for you to simply be still, and know that you are home. Before we close, let me share with you a few more stories. These are not stories from ancient texts. They are stories from ordinary people, people like you, who have walked this path and found their own way through the forest. Their names have been changed. Their faces are hidden. But their experiences are real. Elena was 53 years old when her husband of 30 years died suddenly of a heart attack. They had been high school sweethearts. They had grown up together, grown old together. He was the only man she had ever been with. And now he was gone. For 2 years, she did not even think about sex. She was too deep in grief. But slowly, as the grief began to ease, something else began to stir. She felt lonely. She felt hungry for touch, for connection, for the simple warmth of another body. She felt ashamed of these feelings. She felt she was betraying her husband. She felt she was too old, too wrinkled, too undesirable. She came to the temple because she did not know where else to go. She sat in the meditation hall and wept. She said, "I feel like a teenager again, but I'm not a teenager. I'm an old woman. I should be past all this. I should be content with memories. Why am I still wanting? Why am I still longing?" The monk said, "The river does not stop flowing because the season changes. It simply flows differently. Your desire is not a betrayal. It is not a weakness. It is life, still flowing through you. The question is not whether you should feel it. The question is how you will relate to it. Will you let it torment you? Or will you let it teach you? Elena left the temple that day with a new perspective. She did not suddenly go out and find a lover. That was not her path. But she did stop fighting her feelings. She let herself feel the longing, the loneliness, the hunger. She sat with them, in meditation, without judgment. And slowly, something shifted. The longing became less sharp. The loneliness became less desperate. She began to feel a kind of tenderness toward herself, a kind of compassion for this old woman who still wanted to be held. And in that tenderness, she found a peace she had not known was possible. David was a young man, barely 22, when he came to the temple. He was handsome, athletic, popular. He had no trouble attracting women. But he had trouble keeping them. He would date someone for a few weeks, maybe a few months, and then he would lose interest. He would find himself looking at other women, fantasizing about other possibilities. He would feel trapped, suffocated. He would end things, usually badly, and move on. He told himself he was just young, just sowing his wild oats. But deep down, he was troubled. He saw the pain in the eyes of the women he left. He heard the hurt in their voices. He felt, underneath his bravado, a cold emptiness that no amount of conquest could fill. He sat before the monk and said, "I don't understand what's wrong with me. I have everything a guy could want. But I'm not happy. I hurt people. I hurt myself. What am I missing?" The monk said, "You are missing yourself. You are looking for something in others that you have not found in yourself. You think the next woman will be the one. You think the next relationship will be different. But it will never be different until you stop running. Until you sit still. Until you face the emptiness you are trying to outrun." David did not want to hear this. He argued. He defended himself. He said he was just being honest about his needs. But the monk did not argue back. He simply sat, radiating a quiet compassion that slowly, over time, began to penetrate David's defenses. David stayed at the temple for a month. He meditated. He walked in the forest. He talked with the monk. And slowly, he began to see. He began to see that his restlessness was not about sex. It was about fear. Fear of intimacy. Fear of being known. Fear of being trapped. He had been using women the way an addict uses a drug, to avoid the pain of being alone with himself. And it had never worked. It never would. He left the temple with a new commitment. He decided to stop dating for a while. He decided to sit with himself, to get to know himself, to make peace with the emptiness he had been running from. It was hard. It was lonely. But it was real. And in that reality, he began to find something he had never found in any woman's arms, the beginning of genuine self-love. May was a successful businesswoman in her 40s. She had built a company from nothing. She was respected, admired, wealthy. But her personal life was a mess. She had been married twice, divorced twice. She had a series of affairs, each one more passionate than the last, each one ending in disaster. She was drawn to powerful men, men who challenged her, men who were just as ambitious and driven as she was. And every time, the same pattern played out. The initial excitement. The intense connection. The inevitable power struggle. The bitter end. She came to the temple because she was exhausted. She said, "I don't understand. I'm successful in every other area of my life. Why can't I get this right? Why do I keep choosing men who are wrong for me? Why do I keep repeating the same mistakes?" The monk said, "Tell me about your father." She froze. Her father had been a powerful man. A businessman. A tyrant. He had dominated her childhood with his rages and his demands. She had spent her whole life trying to win his approval, and she had never gotten it. Now, without realizing it, she was still trying. She was choosing men who reminded her of him, hoping that this time, she would finally be enough. The monk said, "You are not choosing lovers. You are choosing ghosts. You are trying to rewrite a story that ended long ago. But the story cannot be rewritten. It can only be seen. And when you see it clearly, you can let it go." May began a new practice. She began to notice, when she felt attracted to a man, what it was that drew her. Was it genuine connection? Or was it some echo of the past? She began to ask herself, am I seeing this man as he is? Or am I projecting onto him the image of someone else? Slowly, over time, she began to disentangle herself from the ghosts. She began to make different choices. She began to date men who were kind rather than powerful, gentle rather than demanding. It was strange at first. It felt unfamiliar. But it also felt like coming home. James was a gay man in his 30s. He had grown up in a religious family that taught him that his desires were sinful, shameful, wrong. He had spent his adolescence praying to be changed, hating himself for not being changed. He had come out in his 20s, left his family's church, and thrown himself into the gay community with a kind of desperate intensity. He had casual sex, lots of it. He told himself he was free, liberated, finally being true to himself. But underneath the freedom, there was still shame. Still self-hatred. Still a voice that whispered, "You are wrong. You are broken. You are not acceptable." He came to the temple because he was tired of running. He sat before the monk and poured out his story. He waited for judgment. He waited for rejection. But the monk simply looked at him with the same kindness he looked at everyone. The monk said, "The Buddha did not teach that any particular form of desire is sinful. He taught that all desire, when clung to, leads to suffering. The issue is not who you desire. The issue is how you relate to desire itself. Do you use it to escape from yourself? Do you let it drive you? Or do you meet it with awareness, with kindness, with wisdom?" James had never heard this before. He had spent his whole life either hating his desires or indulging them. He had never considered that there might be a third way. He stayed at the temple for a long time, learning to meditate, learning to be with his desires without either fighting them or acting on them. He learned to feel the shame without believing it. He learned to feel the longing without being consumed by it. And slowly, the shame began to dissolve. Not because he became someone else, but because he finally accepted himself as he was. Priya was a young woman from a traditional family. She had been raised to believe that sex was something to be saved for marriage, something sacred, something special. She believed this. She wanted this. But then she fell in love with a man who did not share her beliefs. He was kind, gentle, respectful. He did not pressure her. But he made it clear that he wanted to be intimate with her before marriage. He said it was important to him, that it was part of how he expressed love. Priya was torn. Part of her wanted to say yes. Part of her was afraid. Part of her was curious. Part of her was ashamed of being curious. She came to the temple because she did not know what to do. The monk listened to her story. Then he said, "No one can make this decision for you. But I can offer you a question to hold. The question is this: whatever you choose, can you choose it with awareness? Can you choose it without guilt, without fear, without the desperate need to be right? Can you choose it, and then let go of the choice, and simply be present with what arises?" Priya sat with this question for a long time. She realized that the problem was not the choice itself. The problem was her relationship to the choice. She was so afraid of making the wrong decision that she was paralyzed. The monk was inviting her to trust herself. To make a decision, and then to trust that whatever happened, she could meet it with awareness. In the end, she decided to wait. Not because she was afraid, but because she realized that waiting felt right to her. It felt aligned with her values. Her boyfriend respected her decision. Their relationship deepened. And when, years later, they did finally come together, it was with a fullness and a presence that neither of them could have imagined. Robert was in his 60s, a retired teacher, a widower. He had been alone for 5 years since his wife died. He had made peace with his solitude. He had his books, his garden, his meditation practice. He was content. But then he met someone. A woman at the community center, also widowed, also alone. They started having coffee together. Then lunch. Then long walks. And one day, sitting on a bench overlooking a lake, she took his hand. Robert felt something he had not felt in years. A flutter. A warmth. A longing. He was confused. He was almost 80. Wasn't he supposed to be past all this? Wasn't he supposed to be content with memories? He came to the temple to talk. The monk smiled. "You thought desire was for the young?" Robert laughed. "I guess I did." "The river flows until it reaches the ocean," the monk said. "It does not stop halfway. Your heart is still alive. Your capacity for connection is still alive. The question is not whether you should feel this. The question is whether you can feel it without losing yourself. Whether you can be with this woman, and still be at home in yourself. Whether you can love without clinging. Whether you can enjoy without grasping." Robert took this to heart. He continued to see the woman. They grew closer. They became lovers. And it was beautiful. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. They were two old people, with wrinkled skin and aching joints, discovering that the heart does not age. That desire does not retire. That love, when it is met with awareness, is always new. Anita was a survivor. She had been sexually abused as a child, and the wounds had never fully healed. She had spent years in therapy. She had learned to function, to have relationships, even to enjoy sex sometimes. But there was always a shadow. Always a part of her that was afraid, that was vigilant, that was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She came to the temple because she had heard that meditation could help with trauma. She was skeptical. She had tried so many things. But she was also desperate. She sat before the monk and told him her story. She expected pity. She expected horror. But the monk simply listened, with the same calm attention he gave to everyone. When she finished, he said, "You have been carrying this for a long time." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "The body remembers," he said. "The mind remembers. But the awareness that knows the remembering is not touched by it. That awareness is pure. That awareness is free. The practice is to learn to rest in that awareness, even when the memories arise. Not to push them away. Not to fight them. But to hold them in a larger space, a space of kindness and compassion." Anita began to meditate. At first, it was hard. The memories came. The fear came. But she learned, slowly, to simply be with them. To let them arise, and let them pass. To hold them in awareness, without being swallowed by them. And over time, something shifted. The memories lost some of their power. The fear became less intense. She began to feel, for the first time, that she was more than her trauma. That the awareness that knew the pain was not itself in pain. That there was a part of her that had never been touched, never been damaged, never been broken. This is the gift of the path. Not to erase the past, but to free us from its grip. Not to make us perfect, but to show us that perfection was never the point. The point is awakening. The point is freedom. The point is to discover, in the midst of all our longing and all our fear, the peace that has always been there, waiting. We come now to the end of our journey. The forest has opened into a clearing. The monk has spoken. The stories have been told. And you are left with a question: what now? There is a teaching that has been passed down through generations of Buddhist practitioners. It is not found in any scripture. It is not attributed to any master. But it is whispered in meditation halls, in temple gardens, in the quiet spaces between breaths. It is this: never let passion override compassion. This is the golden rule of the path. Not a commandment. Not a prohibition. Just a reminder. When passion arises, and it will arise, again and again, let it be held by compassion. Compassion for yourself. Compassion for the other. Compassion for the tangled, beautiful, messy mystery of being human. Passion wants. It grasps. It demands. It is hungry and urgent and blind. Compassion sees. It understands. It makes space. It is patient and kind and wise. Passion without compassion is a fire that burns everything it touches. Compassion without passion is a river that never flows. But passion held by compassion, that is something else entirely. That is a fire that warms without burning. That is a river that nourishes without flooding. So here is your practice. In every moment of desire, ask yourself, is this kind? Is this wise? Is this likely to cause suffering? Not as a judgment, but as an inquiry. Not as a way of shaming yourself, but as a way of waking up. And when you fail, because you will fail, we all fail, do not add a second arrow of self-hatred. Simply notice, learn, and begin again. The path is not about getting it right. It is about staying on the path. It is about continuing to walk, even when you stumble. It is about returning, again and again, to the still point within. You are not alone. The monk is still in the clearing. The forest is still waiting. And the path is always there, beneath your feet, ready to be walked. Welcome to Monk's Temple. May your journey be peaceful. May your heart be open. May your desires be held in the gentle light of awareness. And may you find, in the end, what you have been seeking all along, not the perfect object, not the perfect experience, but the perfect peace that was always, already, here. Thank you for listening. If these teachings have touched you, if they have opened something in your heart, then consider sharing them with someone who needs to hear them. And if you have not already, please subscribe to Monk's Temple. Let us walk this path together. Let us support each other on the journey. And let us never forget, the clearing is always here. The monk is always waiting. And the truth is always, already, within you.